You are the author of this book, Ancient China's Tao Te Ching in Gonzo, by Nobody Xpecial. Personal circumstances and writing choices. I write as a grandchild of the Far East and the Far West, who wishes to please all my ancestors by the way I conduct my life on earth. My 14th great-grandfather first arrived in the New World from the Netherlands in 1674. He and his son settled on what is known in 2026 as the Hudson River Valley in New York. My 12th and 11th great-grandfathers fought British imperialism in the American Revolution as Sons of Liberty. On August 6, 1945, my Ryukyuan grandparents were in their mid-40s, had married as young adults, and felt the misfortune of barrenness. They lived with their siblings near Osaka, about 500 kilometers from Hiroshima. 9 months and 1 week later, my mother was born. In the 1970s, when an immigration floodgate in America opened to Japanese, she entered the United States to live her life and raise a family. This way, I was born on American soil in 1978. Both family sides were eager to instill their thinking systems into my young mind. I was an inquisitive child and asked a lot of questions. Around age 4, I was instructed by my paternal grandfather to seek and recognize patterns in the world around me. Later, he taught me to race sailboats as a negotiation with the wind. I see parallels between sailing a boat and Sino-Tibetan logograph structures. Around age 6, my mother pointed out that, as a child born native of 2 different cultures, I was positioned to observe the strengths and weaknesses of both. She told me to borrow the strengths from both sides and leave behind the weaknesses. I can report the 2 cultures are well more congruous than they are divergent. These 2 ideas worked wonders for me. Between 2006 and 2020, I read perhaps a dozen English renditions of Tao Te Ching in an attempt to clarify confusions. These readings confirmed for me that English translators and renderers had the right ideas. I saw a clear appreciation of paradoxical relationships described as practical contradictions. However, I spotted unexplainable storytelling inconsistencies across them. To seek the literary structure organizing Tao Te Ching, I recalled my Suzuki piano training from childhood. I listened to an audiobook rendition once a day, every day, for 3 months, sometimes twice a day. I thought I might be able to hear its structure through memorization. I was wrong. Next, I thought I might see the written structure. To be clear, I do not consider myself fluent in traditional Chinese or kanji. I am far from it. For this work, I have relied on my childhood experience. I often acted as a para-interpreter between my mother and various people in the communities we joined. I was able to listen to both sides of their conversation and help find English phrases to connect the 2 perspectives. My correctness was confirmed by nodding heads, a break in some tension, and the ability for all parties to move forward in whatever process had brought us to the discussion. Line by line, I applied the same method to 5 English translations of Tao Te Ching. Guy Fu Feng and Jane English, Laozi, Tao Te Ching, Vintage Books, 1997. Stephen Mitchell, Tao Te Ching, Harper Perennial, 1988. Jim Clatfelter, Tao Te Ching, 2000. John H. MacDonald, Tao Te Ching, an insightful and modern translation by J. M. MacDonald, 1996. Getting Right with the Tao, a contemporary spin on the Tao Te Ching, edited by R. Hogan, New York, Channel 5 Books. When their 5 voices diverged too far for me to reconcile with comfort, I consulted 2 other copies to help settle meaning. Ursula K. Le Guin, Tao Te Ching, a book about the way and the power of the way. Shambhala, 1997. Ralph Allen Dale, Tao Te Ching, a new translation and commentary. Barnes & Noble Books, 2004. By this time, I had some ideas about how to justify English interpretations more proximal to Sino-Tibetan thinking systems. I revised third-person descriptive language as second-person imperative language to match the instruction I had heard as a youngster. Out of context, this language pattern can fall as pointed on a Western ear. The ancient wisdom being applied is that explanations tend to confuse more so than clarify. Therefore, instructors keep directives concise and rely on demonstration or practice to instruct learners. Third-person language is not well suited to express Far Eastern sentiments. Speaking relationships there extend from casual to high formality and tend to follow riverbeds carved out by Confucius. Since the mouth is a humid and not so clean location, to speak a person's name aloud presumes a familiarity or intimacy. Public announcement of private closeness seems unfit and out of touch. So whatever reason is behind such an announcement may be met with acute public scrutiny. Third-person chatter, however innocent, can invite suspicions of gossip and troublemaking. By English syntax, gender is a third-person expression. For this work, I listed gender assignments by anatomical connotations. When a meaning related to the masculine or feminine reproductive systems, I assigned a gender label according to the role being mentioned. When a meaning was unrelated to sex, I assigned a gender-neutral label according to the activity being mentioned. In Chings 31 and 67, this rule produced labels otherwise unanticipated by me. I took some liberty with Ching 60 by incorporating an adage familiar to many English readers and attributed to Laozi by a separate work. At the word level, OneLook.com Reverse Dictionary and Thesaurus provided an excellent resource to select English words with high fidelity. I was fortunate to have access to this master's tool. It made weighty contribution to these pages. I selected words with consideration for the incubation period of Tao Te Ching. Some contemporary technologies and English idioms are peppered in for the warmth of Western spice. Otherwise, I tended to prefer technologies in use during Tao Te Ching's historical era. Once my English rendition of the passages was complete, a question remained as to the Ching titles. Contemporary debate over Ching titles stems from inconsistencies among historical copies. Some believe Ching numberings and titles are later additions. Different historical copies have displayed different titles or variations in the numeration of the Chings. Some copies in simplified Chinese and in English omit Ching titles altogether. The possibility remains that archaeologists will unearth more ancient copies that add considerable evidence. To resolve title treatment for this copy, I turned to American author Ursula K. Le Guin and borrowed from the process she listed in her notes to troubleshoot my own. She employed Paul Carus's Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching Chinese English with Introduction Transliteration, 1898. At age 28, Paul Carus emigrated from Germany and took up residence in Chicago, Illinois. He had access to 5 different Chinese copies of Tao Te Ching and compared them line by line to produce a copy in traditional Chinese and one in English. Alongside his traditional Chinese logographs, Carus listed literal translations and page number references for Samuel Wells Williams' Chinese-English Dictionary, 1889. I gained digital access to it via Scribd.com. Samuel Wells Williams led an active life as a Presbyterian missionary and a statesman before retiring into academia. In 1833, at age 21, he took charge of an American printing press in Guangdong as one of 3 Christian missionaries to re-enter China. In 1837, he was involved in an unsuccessful attempt to negotiate Japan out of Sakoku. Under the auspices of these authors and their works, I translated Qing titles from Paul Carus's traditional Chinese. I interpret Qing titles as relevant. Each acts as an orienting contradiction or philosophical perpendicularity with the meaning of its corresponding passage. Together, a title and its passage tend to implicate a paradoxical relationship. When checking for Qing-wide coherence, one of my renderings stood out as gibberish English, Qing 51. Even when consulting all 7 English copies and allowing for gentle smudges of approximation, my methodology could not draw a solid English phrasing. I resolved to allow Qing 51 to be the single Qing here translated using Carus's and Wells Williams tools. It stands as the sole exception to my regular process. As I entered the editing stage of the writing process, I had found no fathomable literary structure to resolve my original curiosity. Instead, my mind's eye had developed a habit of playing around with an image of a 9x9 array as I focused on my computer. After months of this, what I believed to be an intended meaning of the original author glinted at me from this mental image. Afterward, I hired a native Mandarin reader for feedback on my English treatment of the Chings. This reader pointed out that Chings 20, 49, and 66 presented reversed relationships from the original orientation while remaining true to deeper meanings. I left these as markers of my Indo-European toward Sino-Tibetan direction. Also, my opening stanza of Qing 59 and expression of Qing 65 were identified as difficult to reconcile with native meanings. Both were re-rendered using notes provided by the native Mandarin reader. Afterward, I hired a native English proofreader. As a result, a handful of labels were changed to improve message clarity. When it came time to write an introduction for Tao Te Ching, my wish was to provide readers a reliable report in English from scratch. Of all the Indo-European voices I have encountered in my studies, a Gonzo voice claiming no credit seems and feels most congruous with my native Taoist sentiments. Combined with my background in human development, personhood, neurolinguistics, and pedagogy, the voice of the universe emerged as Nobody Xpecial, a bodiless voice that speaks through anybody who sweeps aside the ego, if only just for a moment. I suggest pairing this book's introduction with Bruce Lee's Striking Thoughts, as it expresses blind hidden bow archery from a visceral perspective. No endorsements were made by any mentioned parties. With awareness of the unmoving Ching and square edge orientations, an English reader may explore transitions between the Chings the way a child might explore a jungle gym. Ching 41 offers a stable entry point, as do each of the other Chings in their own particular way. Play with it.